Yirmiyahu was a prophet, was a good chaver of mine. Never understood a single word he said, but we helped him to drink his yain. And we always have some mighty fine yain. Singing Simchat Le'olam, Kol HaYiladim now. Simcha to the dagim in the deep blue sea. Simcha to you and me.
Welcome to the Haftarah Plethora video Zoomcast, where we try to bring a little joy to the world and talk about prophets like Jeremiah, Isaiah, and Ezekiel.
And sometimes the lesser-known prophets like Malachi, Hosea, Obadiah, and Amos.
Nothing gets by you, Rick. Malachi, Hosea, Obadiah, and Amos just happen to be the prophets that we read this week and the following 3 weeks. Our sages who selected the prophetic readings for the Haftarot like to mix things up. Unfortunately, to the best of my knowledge, the sages didn't leave notes about their reasons for selecting the various Haftarot, but we can guess, which we will do right after I introduce us. I'm Larry Herman, sipping some very fine wine and talking Haftarah with my very good friend, the king of cannellation, Rick Muller. How are you doing today, Rick?
Just great, just great. How did Millie do on Halloween?
Thanks for asking. As I showed you last week, she dressed up as Frida Kahlo.
Diane looks happy, but not in costume.
We're a little old for that. But her parents didn't hesitate to dress up with her.
Looks like your son Aaron is the painting canvas, and your daughter-in-law Aaron Beth is the palette.
Exactly, Rick. A real family affair. But they also had a fallback. Here's Millie as a unicorn.
And which costume did she trick-or-treat in?
Frida Kahlo. But unfortunately for her, I think that her father got all the candy. But let's get back to our Haftarah for the week. Rick, do you know the name of the prophet from whose book we read this week?
Of course, it's Malachi. It's right here in the first verse. Masad Dvar Adonai Yisrael Beyad Malachi.
But the name of the prophet, is it Malachi? Or does Malachi simply mean my messenger?
It's me. All I know is that Malachi is the last of the prophets, or at least his book is the last book in the part of the Tanakh or Bible known as the Minor Prophets.
True, Malachi is the last book. And while we cannot be sure, this prophet lived shortly after the return from exile and the rebuilding of the temple. In fact, even Ezra, among others, thinks that he, Malachi, is actually Ezra the scribe. The book of Malachi is indeed one of the shortest in the Tanakh, only 3 short chapters and 55 verses in its entirety. We read almost half of it today, and then we read much of the rest on Shabbat HaGadol.
He must have had a powerful message to have so much of his writings included in the Haftarah readings.
I can't say that I'm sure that that's true. From what I can tell, he's included this week because he mentions Jacob and Esau right in the beginning of the first chapter. And for Shabbat HaGadol, because he mentions Eliyahu.
True, Jacob and Esau are the subject of verse 2 here. So that connects to the parsha, which is mainly the story of Jacob and Esau's youth and their rivalry for their parents' love.
So that's the obvious connection. But from there, it's less clear what the connection and message is. Malachi goes on to reference Edom, the national embodiment of Esau, and frequent symbol for Rome or other oppressor states. But if Malachi is referring to a 5th century BCE event here, it's beyond my comprehension. Frankly, I think the principle of Occam's razor applies here.
I've been waiting for you to cut that ponytail of yours, or at least trim your beard.
Not that razor. I'm referring to the philosophical rule that states that the simplest explanation is the best. The parsha is primarily about Jacob and Esau, and the sages conveniently found a parallel in the opening to the book of Malachi. I can also see how the 2nd century CE sages who chose the Haftarah were also preoccupied by Roman oppression, so the reference to Edom in verse 4 might have brought their own situation to mind. But even there, it seems a bit of a stretch. The commentary in Eitz Chaim says that the Haftarah provides scriptural assurance that Edom and all its evil historical incarnation were condemned by God. Still, that only accounts for the first 5 verses of the Haftarah, which I think is a slender reed on which to hang such an important message. From verse 6 onward, the text seems to be addressing the matters of ritual, the priesthood, and getting the people back in line regarding the temple cult. But none of that is clear from the text. And according to the reading that I've done, there's considerable uncertainty whether Malachi was actually preaching or prophesying after the restoration.
Heck, and we don't even know if his name is Malachi.
Rick, where I see fog, you often see forms illuminated by the light of the trope. Can you help me out here?
Well, it's actually the sound and form of the trope, but I'll give it a try. The Haftarah is filled with special and rare trope, including 2 pazers and a bunch of kadma v'azlas, your favorite. But the first 5 verses, which are the ones that connect to the Torah portion, and they're rather tame. The fireworks don't really get started until verse 6.
So that means that the most interesting trope deal with the matters of ritual and what the priests are saying and doing, and have nothing to do with Jacob and Esau. So you agree that the main point has something to do with priests, rituals, and people.
Yep, but here's the caveat. Maybe there is a connection. What do we know about Jacob from the parsha? That he was a prevaricator or a deceiver. He used words to mislead. And Malachi is warning the priests not to use their words deceptively, to be honest, and set a good standard for the people.
And not be like Jacob.
You said it, not me.
Rick, I think that in all these verses, there's a lot of sarcasm, which I don't think comes through the translation. One definition of sarcasm is the use of words that mean the opposite of what you really want to say, similar to deception. So perhaps Malachi is telling his priests not to be like Jacob in that respect.
One other general trope observation, usually we have several dargah tavir combinations.
Yep.
But this week we only have 1 dargah all by itself, and then 9 tavirs by themselves. I do think that there could be something there, but I'll talk about it later on.
Rick, your trope observations are always interesting, even if the tropalization is mysterious.
Tropalization?
Yeah, the suffix ization means the act, process, or result of making or doing. So tropalization means the process of assigning tropes to the text.
Okay, if you say so. How about if we get to the Haftarah chantalization then? How do you want to split up the chanting?
I like that. Well, I thought we'd start with verses 1 through 5 of chapter 1, which deal with the Jacob, Esau, Edom connections, as we said. Then we'll read the rest of chapter 1, where Malachi focuses on the priests and their shortcomings and the shortcomings of their ritual sacrifices. Then we'll finish with the first 7 verses of chapter 2, which are Malachi's charge to the priests to carry out their duties. So, Rick, what observations do you have about the first 5 verses?
Well, like I said, there's not a whole lot there, but all we've got is the Kadma V'Azla combo at the beginning of verse 4. Ki tomar Edom, Kadma V'Azla, which would seem to accentuate Edom, which, as you said, is another name for Esau, but also more generally for Israel's enemies. So perhaps the trope is signaling that we are to understand this reference more generally, that God will crush all of Israel's enemies. So the Kadma V'Azla over the words Ki tomar Edom might also tell us that it doesn't matter what our enemies say, it's what they do, what we do that matter.
Works for me. Rick, the bracha, and then chapter 1, verses 1 through 5.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshana b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Masa devar Adonai el Yisrael beyad Malachi Ahavti etchem, Amar Adonai, V'amartem, V'ama ahavtanu, Haloach Esav liYaakov, Num Adonai, Va'ohav et Yaakov, Ve'et Esav saneti, Va'asim et harav shmama, Ve'et nachalato litanot midbar, Ki tomar Edom rushashnu, V'nashuv v'nivneh choravot, Ko amar Adonai tzvaot, Hema yivnu va'ani eheros, V'kar'u lahem gevur risha, V'ha'am asher za'am Adonai adolam, Ve'enechem tir'ena, Ve'atem tomru yigdal Adonai me'al ligvul Yisrael.
Very nice, Rick. What do you see in verses 6 through 14?
Okay, we start right off with a verse that has the most unusual and interesting trope. Verse 6 starts with a tavir on the word bain, the little word bain, which here appears as a relational metaphor, a son honoring his father, similar to a slave honoring his master. But the Torah reading is all about Jacob deceiving his father Yitzchak, not honoring his father. The contrast to me is startling. In fact, we see that in the pazer, on the word chvodi, God is asking, where is my honor? We can put those same words into the mouth of Isaac, who should be asking Jacob the same question.
True. And then the drama continues with the Talisha Ketana Kadma Va'azla combo on Ani Aye Morai. God asks, if I am master, where is the reverence due me?
Right, same theme and message. The text is poetic, the trope are dramatic. And then the repetition of the pashta, lachem on top of that, hakohanim on top of that, makes it clear that here God is talking to the priests, not to the people. And then the verse concludes with Vamartem, with a zakef gadol, God sarcastically saying, and you, priests, ask, how have we scorned your name? The Vamartem is repeated in verse 7, that time with a tipcha, but followed by another zakef gadol, an bem morchem, again sarcastically saying, the table of the Lord can be treated with scorn.
Malachi and God are sure harsh with the priests. In fact, every verse in this section is a bill of indictment against the priests for their shodding offerings and sacrifices. And in verse 11, Malachi, speaking for God, uses, again, sarcasm, claiming that even the nations of the world would do a better job of honoring his name.
Yeah, and you know that ain't right. But you are right. Verse 11 starts with a very dramatic Azla Geresh, Ki mi mizrach shemesh, ve'ad mevuo, gadol shemi bagoyim. So where the sun rises, all the ancient religions look to the east for the sun god to come up and then go. And my name is honored among the nations, Malachi says about God.
Yep. Rick, let's chant verses 6 through 14.
Ben yichabed av ve'eved adonav ve'im av ani aye chevodi ve'im adonim ani aye morai amar Adonai tzvaot lachem hakohanim bozeh shmi v'amartem b'mevazinu et shemecha Magishim al mizbechi lechem megoal va'amartem b'mege'anucha ve'emorchem shulchan Adonai nivzehu v'chitagishun iver lizboach ein ra v'chitagishu piseach v'chole ein ra akrivehu na lefechatecha hayirtzecha o haisafanecha amar Adonai tzvaot be'ata chaluna fnel vichonenu mierchem hayitzazot haisa mikem panim amar Adonai tzvaot mi gam bachem biskor delataim velo ta'iru mizbechi chinam ein li chefetz bachem amar Adonai tzvaot umincha lo er'e mierchem ki mi mizrach shemesh ve'ad mevo gadol shmi bagoyim uvechol makom muktar mugash lishmi umincha Torah ki gadol shmi bagoyim amar Adonai tzvaot ve'atem mechalalim oto ve'emorchem shulchan Adonai megoalhu v'nivo nivze ochlo v'amartem hine matla'a v'hipachtem oto amar Adonai tzvaot v'havetem gazul v'tapiseach v'tachole v'havetem et hamincha ha'ertze otach miyerchem amar Adonai Be'arur nochel, be'yesh be'edro zachar, be'noder, be'zoveach moshchat l'Adonai, ki melech gadol ani, amar Adonai tzvaot, ushmi Noravagoyim.
Rick, the tone in the first 7 verses of chapter 2 takes a real turn. Having chastised the priest harshly in the previous chapter, Malachi now charges them to change their ways, lest their intended blessings turn into curses. He urges them to follow the model of Levi and his sons, the original priests, who revered and respected God, who served God loyally, and who the people trusted because they were the messengers of God.
Yeah, and verse 2 has all the fireworks here. It starts with a pazer, followed by kadmavia tilisha ketana and kadmavia azla. Imlo tishma'u, if you don't listen, imlo tasimu alev, and if you don't take it to heart. Malachi is showing the priests the path here, and then the only dargah, coming back to that, follows latet kavod lishmi, to give. It's the main stress, honor to my name. Note that the word latet provides a link again to the parsha. The priests were not giving honor; they weren't giving the right sacrifices. So God threatens to turn their blessings into curses. just as Jacob deceived Isaac to give the blessing to him instead of to Esau.
Perhaps we can go so far as to say that Jacob risked having his ill-gotten blessing turned into curses.
Yeah, well, things didn't go as well for him as he wanted, especially with Lavan. But I want to make one last trope connection. Verse 4, the top of page 165, starts with another Zakev Gadol on Vidatem. You will know, or you should know, but the priest didn't know. As we saw with the two earlier uses of the Zakev Gadol on the variations of the word Amar, they were making lame excuses then for bringing lame sacrifices. Malachi and God are trying desperately to get the priests to see the errors of their ways and to change.
Great read, Rick. Maybe we should call this the Haftarah of the Lonesome Dargah.
Hey, good.
Take us home.
Okay. Ve'ata alechem hamitzvah hazot hakohanim im lo tishmu v'im lo tasimu alev latet kavod lishmi amar Adonai tzvaot v'shilachti v'achem et ha'me'era ve'aroti et birchotechem ve'gam aroti ha ki einechem samim alev hineni go'er lachem et hazera Vizeriti feresh al penechem, peresh chagechem, venasa etchem elav. Vidatem ki shilachti alechem et hamitzvah hazot liot briti et levi. Amar Adonai Tzvaot, Briti Haita ito, Achayim V'Hashalom, V'atnem lo Mora, V'yira'eni, Umipnei Shmi Nichatu, Torah Temet Hayita Befihu, Ve'avla lo nimtza v'sfatav v'shalom uv'mishor halach iti ve'rabim heshiv me'avon ki siftei kohen yishmeru da'at ve'torah yivakshu mipihu ki Malach Adonai Tzvaot.
Great chanting, Rick. As always, thanks to our technical and artistic director, Norm Gar. And don't forget to write us with your thoughts and comments. Our emails are below. And if you like our Zoomcast, please forward the link to your friends and family. We wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and see you again next week.
Shabbos.